you hear me on this good enough? I say, can you hear me with this? Is it good? That works? That works. All right. They have those forms there.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Community Homeworks. We're where we hope to empower our neighbors to maintain safe, sustainable, and dignified homes. Today's workshop is for home safety and security with our wonderful instructor, Mr. Lee Taylor. Just a few things first. We have several handouts for the workshop. If you don't have them already, they're over on that table. Please grab as many snacks as you would like. The bathroom is up the ramp. Just follow the sign to the left. And if you have a question, we do have a question mic so that we can capture your audio. So the lovely Tesha is holding the mic right there. And yeah, please open it up to questions. If you have certain situations that you're curious about, please let us know. Otherwise, this workshop is brought to us by Old National Bank, so thanks to them. And I'll let Mr. Taylor take it away.
All right. So this is, this is home safety and security. I like to start out all our classes by going through and asking how old of a house you have, or if you have a house. I'll start because it helps me.
House was built in 1952, so
Okay.
I guess that's 72 years old.
The year is good for me. It tells me a bunch of stuff about it, so that's good. All right. And yeah, I probably asked you this, but I forgot. So.
Oh, probably
In the 40s. Okay. And you're gonna be getting a new one.
50s.
Huh?
The one currently is built in the 50s.
Okay. But you're gonna be going into a Habitat house now. You did. All right. So with this class, there's a lot of stuff to go through, and if you guys have questions, feel free to ask. This class does overlap quite a bit with many other classes, so sometimes all I can do is really just touch on something. It'll be covered a little bit more in depth in another class. So the thing about home safety and security, if you have to remember one thing, is to not let security take precedence over safety. And yes, those two are related, right? But why do I say that? I say that because a lot of times I see things, I have seen things, where somebody is thinking, I need to secure this window, or I need to, do whatever, right? And really what they're doing is, sure, they're securing. Let's say, I'll pick on a window. So, somebody's like, oh, I just got broken into, and then they open this window up, and so I'm going to get screws and lock this window down. Okay, yeah, that makes it so somebody can't open the window. They can still break the glass, but can't open it up. But you have to think of it in a different way. Does that mean that if you're caught in a fire, that egress window now all of a sudden is not an egress window, meaning an escape route out of the house, right? There are a lot of things out there and ways, and I'll explain some as we go, where it sometimes is tricky. You have to look at it and kind of go, and if you kind of keep it at that term of thinking, that's a good way to think of it. So, and we have a couple of different examples as we're going through the evening. So what we're going to be talking about is preventing and preparing for safety-related items in your home. We'll talk about the functions, maintenance of smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. We'll talk about the dangers of radon. We're going to be talking about a fire escape plan. We'll talk about carbon monoxide, fire extinguishers, and having that general knowledge. There's some very, very easy things that you can do. Like I said, you can follow along in the outline. I tried to stay with it. Related workshops, common door repairs, electrical system, ventilation and air conditioning, all about mold, pipe repairs, flooring repairs. The list goes on and on. And that's part of what we try to teach here, is that you wouldn't think that flooring repairs would be part of a home safety and security, or that they had any connection whatsoever. They do. So that's part of what we try to talk about. All right. So I'm going to start out with smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. You've all seen the good old basic smoke detectors out there in the world. These are the battery operated styles. And take the battery out and it's just a hunk of plastic on the wall, right? All different types. But it is broken down into two basic types for the smoke detectors. There's what's called ionization smoke detectors and photoelectric smoke detectors. The ionization is, my garbage can's on fire, or my drapes are on fire, that sort of fire, right? What you'd find in a kitchen, that sort of stuff, The photoelectric is, Aunt so-and-so fell asleep on the couch while smoking, and the couch is sitting there smoldering, right? Or there's an electrical fire and there's something going on inside the wall. Those slow smoldering fires. So it's a good idea to kind of mix and match those a little bit. Most of the time, usually I'd say a good 80% of the smoke detectors that are out there are those ionization types, those fast flaming fires, right? There are also what are called combo units. So you can get a combo unit that's photoelectric and ionization. You can get combo units that are both those plus a carbon monoxide detector. Okay. Carbon monoxide detectors, and I'm kind of bouncing a little bit, but bear with me. These are, real basic battery operated carbon monoxide detector. Here's another style as I fling it at you, right? They do have a lifespan, carbon monoxide detectors and smoke detectors. Smoke detectors, 10 years. Will they work after 10 years? Maybe. Maybe not. So take that for what it is, right? With me, it's personal, I change them out. How do you know how old your smoke detector is? On the back, you pull these down, I'll pass this guy around. There is a manufacture date on there. It is a requirement. So there is a manufacturer date. And if it's past 10 years, you're kind of, sometimes it's real small. You're kind of playing Russian roulette with whether it's going to work or not, right? Carbon monoxide detectors, 7 years. All right. So same deal. There is a thing on the back saying manufacture date and 7 years for the carbon monoxide detector. Y'all know what carbon monoxide is? Okay. So carbon monoxide is the byproduct of any unspent fuel, basically. So furnaces, you know, you have an exhaust on your furnace. One of these is the exhaust, this guy here. Let's say you get a crack in the pipe or something like that. It starts to spew carbon monoxide in your home. All right. Water heaters, another big one. I don't care what kind of water heater, unless it's electric. But most of us around here use natural gas or propane. They can create carbon monoxide also. You have the pipe, old style pipe coming off, or newer style with a pump on top with PVC pipes. And carbon monoxide levels can rise pretty quickly. There is something to keep in mind with a carbon monoxide detector. A lot of times they call them death detectors, and there's a reason for that. Why they haven't fixed that one, I don't know. So it's a certain parts per million, right, that mixes into the air. The carbon monoxide detectors that you buy out of the store and stuff like that are set to a certain level, okay? That level, if you were to talk to medical staff and all that sort of stuff, at that point, you're really getting sick, right? But that's where they're set at. And it's even worse because people will, they'll go off and they'll just shut it off. It might go off in the middle of the night and they'll go and shut it off and not think about it. I'll deal with it in the morning, right? You can have a catastrophic failure in one of your appliances that will make it so that everybody in the house, especially if it's a sealed up house where, a tight, loose construction, we were talking about this last week, everybody's going to wake up dead. Nice way to put it, right? And I mean, I'm serious. I mean, this happened to my wife and I. That's my wife there. No, we didn't wake up dead. We had carbon monoxide poisoning though. It was a water heater, right, in an old trailer. And what had happened is the water heater had a little leak. And one of those legs fell down. Now this thing was behind, outside access, but behind a closet or something. And what had happened is that water heater settled down and it popped that top off, the exhaust. And it was just dumping into the house. And about the only thing that saved us was the fact that this was an old, very drafty trailer. Because, what was happening is that we were getting a lot of symptoms like a cold, tired, just kind of lethargic, headaches, that sort of stuff. We were getting headaches when we would walk outside in the fresh air, but we didn't realize. And then somebody's like, hey, have you had carbon monoxide? Have you been checked? Have you had your house checked for carbon monoxide? We were like, no. So-called consumers, the guy walks in, turns on his meter, and it just goes, weep, and he looks at us and he goes, hold on, I'm going to go back out. Goes back outside in fresh air, recalibrates it, walks back in. He looks at it and says, well, you should all be dead because the levels were so high. That's the thing, is that carbon monoxide can be sneaky. It can act like a common cold or something along that line. So if you have anything that burns fossil fuel, and I don't care if it's, like I said, water heaters, furnaces, space heaters is another one. Every winter you always hear about, the power outages. Family dies because they're running their generator inside their house or next to their house where it's close to, say, an intake or something along that line. You have to always keep that in mind. So carbon monoxide detectors are one of those things that you should have at bare minimum outside of your sleeping areas. So a lot of times the bedrooms are clustered where you have 3 or 4 bedrooms, and then code now requires carbon monoxide detector to be outside of that. Should be one on every level, right? Standalone styles, battery operated. There's plug-in styles. There are also what are called hardwired. And this is for smoke detectors also, the hardwired style. Hardwired basically means one goes off, they all go off. Because again, you can have this issue. Whether it's fire, carbon dioxide, it doesn't really matter. You have a fire in your basement. You're sleeping on the second floor. How long is it going to take for that smoke detector, if it's a standalone, to be able to go off? And are you going to hear that one that's going off in the basement? So this is a benefit to those hardwired in. It can be tough because most older houses don't have that. Yours will. But, and I just know this because we're having it so long. But, and it's code now. So there are ways you can be able to put in smoke detectors that communicate with each other through Wi-Fi or whatever, right? So there are a lot of ways you can be able to do that. Or you can hire an electrician to come out and hardwire. That can get a little pricey though. All these things, no matter if they're hardwired or they're standalone, should be tested at minimum once every, I like to say 6 months. You know, you can do a simple test. You can do, a fake smoke test, whatever. You can also buy smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors that have no batteries in them, as far as batteries that you can change, right? They have the sealed units. So these are sealed smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors that have a lithium ion battery inside that has a 10-year lifespan. So when it starts going chirp, 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 right? Time to replace that whole unit. If you have wired in smoke detectors, they most of the time have a good old 9-volt battery in them. People say, well, why do I need that? The point is that if I kill the power to the whole house, they still will all go off because now they're running off their 9-volt battery. Okay, so that interconnected part. The interconnected thing about that is really nice. There is one issue with them. So if you have those wired in smoke detectors and they all communicate with each other, and let's say one gets damaged, happens in kids' rooms or whatever, right? And you say, oh, it's a first alert. I'm going to go to the store and pick up a first alert and replace it. Sometimes you get lucky and you get one that will be able to communicate even though they're the same manufacturer. What you need to do is, and it's a real pain, pull out the instructions, get your readers on, and look, and it will say, this works with these particular models, right? So you want to make sure that they can communicate, because I've heard of that happening too, where somebody has replaced it and the one that replaced doesn't communicate with everything else, and by the time they actually went off for whatever reason, it was too late. So they have to be able to communicate with each other, and they will say that in those instructions. As far as placement, we talked about that, at least on every floor, outside of sleeping room, inside the rooms, carbon monoxide detectors on the outside. Yeah.
So I have one that I got when I got a furnace in January.
Oh.
So I have a carbon monoxide detector that I got in January when I got a new furnace.
Yep.
And I asked them if they were gonna, mount it, and they're like, no. And he said, my wife likes to have it right by her bed. And to me, I did for a little bit, and then the light was blinking. And also I thought, if the carbon monoxide is coming from the basement, by the time it reaches, I'm at the top level. It might be a little late. So I put it down on the main floor.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, because that is one of those, it's a rubbing point. So, like I said, carbon monoxide is a byproduct of, non-burn fuel, right? And most of the time it is mixed in with some kind of a warm air, right? Carbon monoxide itself, heavier than air. So when it's mixed in with the hot air, it's going to be up. When it settles down, it's going to be settling down to the floor. Read your instructions. Did it come with instructions as far as where to put it? Maybe. Most carbon monoxide detectors, you can put them at the same height as your smoke detectors. Now, the plug-in style, obviously, it's down there, low to the ground. But, yeah. And I've seen where some people have a mix of them, different heights throughout throughout their house. So, yeah. Mounting them most of the time, like when the hardwired ones, they're usually mounted right up same height as most of the smoke detectors. So it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other sort of situation. But depending on who you talk to, yeah, you can get those varying, concepts on where to put them and stuff. So, and we could keep going on carbon monoxide detectors and smoke detectors, but
Sorry,
No,
I just
that's
have a
fine.
question.
Yep.
And you might get to it, but what do you do once your carbon monoxide detector goes off?
leave.
You leave immediately, and then
You
who do
get
you
the
call?
blank out of the house and call you can call, most of the time you can call consumers and say, my carbon monoxide detector went off, and they'll be out really fast. Oh yeah. So you can also call the fire department and say, my carbon monoxide detector is going off. I'm glad you asked that because there was one little thing. So we were talking about all different types and whatnot, right? So a lot of times people do work in their homes. They'll be doing a remodel project, especially those older homes. And what happens is that dust gets in the air, and it gets inside the mechanics inside that smoke detector, and it will sometimes cause it to nuisance alarm. So this happened to us also. 2 o'clock in the morning, beep beep beep, going off, and I'm like, holy crap! Get up. What? There's nothing. There's nothing. There's nothing. So I put it on hush mode. Kicked off again. I'm like, so fine, we get out. Call the fire department, and they came down, and they searched the house and stuff, and they said there's nothing going on. And then the one guy was like, have you been doing remodel work? And I said, yeah. He says, yeah, you can get dust in them and make them nuisance alarm like that. So if you're doing that sort of thing, those little cans of air, spray them out once in a while. And maybe that might be one of those things that's nice to do once a year, time change, that sort of thing, right? Because I've seen it where spider webs get in there and make them nuisance alarm. And if you get enough of nuisance alarms, you're just going to ignore it. Or you're going to rip it off the wall and throw it in the backyard. So you don't want to get to that point. No laughing at me. Sorry, my wife. Not that I did that once, but anyways. So there's a lot more as far as carbon monoxide detectors and smoke detectors, but we are limited on time. Is there any other questions? Okay. Radon, and you're going to have a thing, all these handouts and stuff. You're going to have a nice thick thing about radon. The thing about radon, it is colorless, odorless, tasteless. You don't realize it's there. Same as carbon monoxide. What's the second leading cause of lung cancer in the United States? It's a naturally occurring issue, and it is usually broken down by counties as far as low risk, moderate, high. Kalamazoo County is high risk. It's what it is. You can do testing for it. You can buy a little, don't have one here, but you can go to the box stores and buy a radon test. And sometimes they're little vials, and you open up and you let it sit in a quiet area in your basement or something like that and let it sit for a while. If you have a newer house, the radon system's already built in. So yours would have that. The older houses, they don't have that. And it's weird because your neighbor can have super high levels. You can have acceptable levels. What is it? 4 parts per million is where that level is, where it starts creeping up. And it can change depending on the season also. So if you don't live in a house with a radon reduction system, I would have it tested, especially if you're seeing, and I'm going to do a really crude drawing, but no laughing. All right, so here's a house, right? And what happens is for a retrofit, what they'll do is you'll see a PVC pipe just like this guy. It's about that big. It's going to pop out the basement, and it's going to run up. It's going to run up the side of the house and get just above the roof line. And it might even have a booster fan on the side. And what that's doing is basically creating negative pressure. There's what's stuff going on underneath, and being able to suck that radon gas out and exhaust it out the top. And you'll see them around, especially in certain neighborhoods. You go around and you'll see these things. They're usually off the back of the house, so they're not too obnoxious. But those are radon reduction systems. So yeah, you want to get it tested. And here's a weird part. A lot of people think, well, my house is, drafty, or I live in a loose construction home. I don't have to worry about it. Actually, you have to worry about it more. And this one took a while for me to get my head wrapped around. I'm like, okay, so radon gets in there, right? It's going to just, drift out, right? And they're like, yeah, you would think that. I said, think of it this way. If you have a straw, right, that has a bunch of holes in it, and you try to drink out of it, you're not going to be able to get anything out of that. Those holes and stuff are the water is the radon. The holes are the drafty house. Are you going to be able to get much water through that straw? No. Versus a sealed up house or a tighter construction house where, yes, there's still levels that can get in there, but if it's sealed up nice, it's less likely to be able to get in. It's less likely to be on a negative pressure inside the home. Hope to pull that stuff in. So radon is one of those things that, it is up to you, but it is one of those things that we live in a high concentration area. So take that for what it is also. So, and get that tested if you want to. Lead testing. It's another wonderful thing that we live with old houses. The house was built before 78. Yeah. Oh, you're yeah, if I'm facing this because bulk this way, yell at me.
Would radon be as toxic as carbon monoxide?
No, carbon monoxide is going to be one of those things that'll kill you quick, and radon is one of those things that'll take its time. So, yeah, and that's the problem, is that people don't see it as an immediate threat. But how much time do you spend inside? And that's one of those cumulative things, right? So, yeah, it is pretty bad. So lead, if your house was built before 78, you run a risk of there being lead-based paint. Back in the day when they built these houses, the older houses, they would say, man, our paint is best because it has higher amounts of lead. And they actually had, they had that as a selling point because there is nothing better than lead paint as far as durability and all that stuff. Besides the fact that it poisons you, but, they didn't know that back then. So where and why, I could get into a whole bunch of different things, but where and why and all that sort of stuff is, what happens is that lead is one of those things that is somewhat cumulative in the body. So a lot of times if you get lead poisoning, it is going to come on again, sort of like a cold, right? It's going to get into your bloodstream. Over time, your body expels a certain amount, but your body also stores it in your bones. So next time you get sick, it pulls stuff out of your bones and you get that up, it catches up with you again. Lead is one of those things that is really bad for young children and women who are going to have kids, right? It's bad for everybody, but those are the two common areas that are like really bad. Lead is one of those things too where if you have, let's say, an original window, this is where living in historic sometimes can be fun because they can't necessarily change those windows out, right? Windows over here, right? So windows a lot of times, especially on the outside, were painted, with some lead-based paint because it's durable. And what happens is that wherever there's friction, two parts rubbing against each other, and let's say there's, lead-based paint, 5 layers down, right? And it starts rubbing that, and it starts to break that paint down into a fine dust. That's when it gets airborne, or it gets, little kids, and it does have a bit of a sweet taste, so they like it. There's a lot of places that have lead, and you can't just necessarily go, well, I don't think that is, so we're good. And most of the time now, the layers have been put over it, right, of paint. But when that paint starts to degrade, and usually it's in those windows, the window troughs, a lot of times that they do lead testing is through the roof as far as the amount of lead in there. A lot of times those troughs are right about this height. Good height for kids to be able to go, right? So they have testing. You can hire somebody to come out and test, where what they'll do is they will, there's a couple of ways they can do testing. They'll go through and they'll take little paint samples and they'll send them off to the lab. There is a really good test. They use an RF gun and they'll walk up to, let's say this is painted trim, and they'll go boop and write down what that area is, and you'll get this report that says, southeast bedroom, north wall, blah, 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 right? It breaks it down. And those are very, very comprehensive reports. You can also do your own sort of test. Now, those tests, they will tell you the levels. The tests that you can buy at home centers and stuff, this is one where it's a vial inside. Let's say I suspect something might be lead. What I do is I snap this and I go up to that and I rub it for a minute. There's instructions on how long. And if it turns red, there's lead there. Doesn't say how much, but it says it's there. So there are multiple ways you can be able to test these. Like I said, these kind of home tests aren't going to give you necessarily real clear results, but at least it's going to be one of those things that you should keep in mind. So that's that deteriorating paint, that sort of stuff. Another thing is doors. A lot of times they painted interior doors, exterior doors, doesn't matter. But there have been plenty of cases where you've seen a door where it sags a little bit and starts rubbing on the side. There have been cases where a whole family got lead poisoning because that door was rubbing, and every time that door was used, it'd flake off a little piece, flake off a little piece. It would just get into the air and mess everybody up, right? Lead also was painted on the outside of the house. So what happens is, over the years, on all these painted houses, that paint flakes out, falls into that layer of dirt. Oh, let's say, 6 feet, 5 to 6 feet out, right? And that lead doesn't necessarily migrate too deep into the soil, about 4 inches or so. But a lot of times that soil around the foundation of the house, where that paint has been flaking over the years, can be really high levels. So that's another area. And that's the thing, is that manding is that you can go through and do all this to be able to clear that lead out. And it can get tracked back in. So, like when I worked at Habitat and we did rehabs, that was part of what we did. We tested the soil and then we had scooped it out. We had to bag it up and get rid of it and put on new. So, yeah. She's not here. No, she's going to find out. So how much lead does it take to contaminate a house? Like, guys, man, come over here. Oh, and I'm doing this over where you can't see it. So here's a packet of sugar, right? And I'll use my work credit card. Why not? So we'll split that. Split that. Split that. We'll split that. That amount that's left over right there about what you need to be able to contaminate roughly about a 1,200 square foot house. Not much. And that's the scariest thing about lead, is that that stuff is just nasty. So it doesn't take much. And, you know, I'm not trying to do scare tactics with you guys and stuff. This is more of a understanding of it. The ways to deal with lead, you can do what's called encapsulation. There's certain paints that you can be able to put over that flaking paint to be able to seal it. And there is abatement, meaning it's pulled out. So there are plenty of companies around that specialize in that. There's testing companies here in town that you can take down something and say, does this have lead in it? Does this have asbestos in it? Whatever, right? Any questions about lead? No, I've scared you. More information, you know, here, and you can look it up. Like I said, there's a whole lot to it. All I can do is really touch on the basics of that. Asbestos is the next thing. So asbestos is, and still is, used as a fire retardant, you know, and it is in a lot of different products. They used it for its durability, and they used it for its flame resistance, where it's not going to catch fire very easily. Older houses, especially ones built in the 40s and 50s, you may run across, let's say you're doing some work, flooring or whatever, and you come across like a self-stickum tile, right? If that tile is about a 9x9 tile, don't mess with it. Seriously. And I mean, you can take it down. There's a place just down on Sprinkle Road where you can take a piece and say, can you test this for asbestos? A lot of times those 9x9 tiles had asbestos in it. How much asbestos is acceptable in a house? None. It's not like lead where there's acceptable levels and there's not. Asbestos is one of those things where it's just not acceptable. The other issue with asbestos is that most of the time it's harmless unless it's disturbed, if that makes sense. Okay? So that tile, if you break it up and stuff, it's going to get in the air. It messes with you in the sense of the fibers, basically like little fish hooks, and they dig into your lungs. And it's one of those cumulative things over the years. And you've all heard the asbestos I can never say it right. Cancer that basically comes from that exposure over time. Yeah, mesothelioma. Thank you. See, she's smarter than I, so that's good. So yeah, I mean, it is a real thing, right? The other area that a lot of times is asbestos, and you can't tell unless you get it tested. You can look at it and go, I think it might, but until it's tested, you don't know, because there are products out there that look like it should be and it's not. There are products out there that you wouldn't think that it is, but it is. But the other is go down in your basement and you're going to look at your heat ducts. Usually the ones that are going right up into the floor or up to the second floor, and they have that white wrap around them. Most of the time, that's asbestos. They wrap that. Now, the wrap itself, like I said, if it's stable, it's not falling apart. Most of the time, it's fine. It's when people start doing their own remodel work and they're like, oh, what's that? And they rip it off, right? There are ways to deal with this. But again, you know, like I work at the YWCA. We had a house where I found asbestos tile and I had to get an abatement contractor in there and they had to seal off the whole house and get rid of it. So, like I said, there are a couple of different areas where asbestos can pop up in a house. Yeah.
Would something?
It's not it's yeah, you don't hear it here.
Got it. Okay. Is like lead or asbestos, is that something that would show up if you buy a home on the home inspection, or not necessarily?
You would hope so. And this boils down to kind of how honest the seller is. And if they don't know, they don't know. Doesn't mean that it's not there or it is there. Now, if you had it tested, that sort of stuff, I think they do have to, and that might be one of those to ask when you have a realtor class, where you talk about that sort of stuff. But also too, with all those things that we were talking about, the lead of the asbestos, if you have work being done, ask that contractor, because if they go over a certain amount of space that they're going to disturb, they're supposed to do it in a lead safe manner or asbestos safe manner, right? So asbestos is, all those are just nasty things, and we could go on and on and on about them, but we can't. So does that make sense so far? You guys have questions at all?
Okay, so we took up tiles in my basement,
Mhm.
and I think they were about that size.
Yep.
I think I may have mentioned it, or like it was a couple friends of mine that were doing it, and like my boys,
Mhm.
and then we painted over it.
Mhm.
I think kills first, and then regular paint.
Mhm.
So what should I do now, if anything?
So that kills and that sort of stuff, does that count as an encapsulant? Probably not. If you, and see, this is where you just don't want to go and rip a piece off, right? You if it really is one of those things that you want to check, you look for asbestos abatement contractors, that sort of thing, have them test it. They do an independent test, and then that test will come back to you, and it will say yes, no, or here's the levels. And then at that point, you can make your decision on how you want to go about it. It's not cheap. I apologize about that, but it's not. So I have my preferences on old houses as far as love old houses, but sometimes the environmental stuff is just drive you nuts. All right. So the next thing we're going to be talking about is fire safety. All right. A couple things with fire safety. One is we're going to go back to those carbon monoxide detectors. Anybody got, let's say kids about 8, 9, 10, 11 grandkids? Okay. Do this when you get home. You should be having a fire drill, right? We used to do this with our girls all the time. And, it's one of those things where you have a plan. We're going to meet in the backyard. We're going to meet in the front yard, whatever it is, right? So you have a plan that everybody understands. You also make it so that they can get through this blindfolded. Because again, you ever seen those fire simulators where that smoke is all the way down to here and you're having to crawl and it's pitch black? So the idea is that whoever is participating in this, that they understand how to get out of the house. They understand the two means of egress out of their room, okay, or wherever it is that they're sleeping. One of the egresses is obviously the bedroom door, to be able to go outside that way. Sometimes that door is blocked by fire, so you may need something like a fire escape ladder if you're in a 2-story house. All right, and they sell these. They're not too much. They're kind of a one-use deal. Don't use them in your practice, right? But just to understand where those are at. Sometimes it boils down to how you lay out the house or how you divvy up the rooms. So I'm going to pick on a simple 4-square house. All right, so here's your steps going up. And here's your hallway. And you have usually a closet on this end. You may have this bedroom, and this is a bath, say. So you think about how this is laid out. Not on any doors, but you get the idea. So what a lot of people will do is they'll say, we need an egress ladder in this room or this room, right? Or where do I put the kids? That sort of stuff. Sometimes, in your fire escape plan, you say, you guys in this room, you're going to be going out this window or out this door first. That's blocked. You're going out this window. And, you do that with each room, each occupant in that room. But the problem is that you're going to have the little kid, right? That you can't, you know, oh, where is the 1-year-old? I don't know. But, and I'm joking around, but it's serious. But, you know, sometimes that room, what I'll tell people is that, let's say this is your nursery, right? And this is the parents' room here, right? And let's say there's a fire and this is totally blocked off. You can't get into that hallway. You can go through the wall. As goofy as that sounds, right? All it is usually plaster, a little bit of lath. You can get into that room, right? So always have that in the back of your mind. How, you know, if I need to get in, how can I do this? Sometimes moving through that wall can be a relatively easy way to be able to get in there. You know, sometimes how it's laid out. So let's say parents are here, 2 kids are here. You know, and this is the nursery. This kid gets out, no problem. But you have an issue with getting way over here. So does that make sense as far as how you lay it out or where you decide where things are going to be? But really have that stuff laid out, practiced, and all that sort of stuff. Set the smoke detectors off. And the reason I say that is that they said kids of a certain age will not hear them. We did this with our oldest daughter. Smoke detector's here. Her bed's here. We kicked it off. And we sat there, and she slept for, it was like 20 minutes. And she just didn't hear it. Yeah. Right, yeah. So they do sell ones where you can put a voice on it, a parent's voice. Say, get your out of bed, right? Or whatever. You can get ones that, you know, flash. There are a lot of different styles out there. And you have to realize if your kids are one of those kind of kids, it's just going to tune that out. And it is a certain age range. It's weird. But it's good to find that out ahead of time, right? So that make that part of your escape planning. There is a lot more with that. But like I said, you have a packet here. You can also talk to your fire department, that sort of stuff. Another thing is making it so, especially if you have young children, that they understand that this creepy thing that might be crawling through the window that has a big oxygen tank and a mask and all this sort of stuff is not a person to hide from. And they've had that issue. But the firefighters can't find them because kids saw them. They look like some freaking alien, and they hide. But if they go to a fire event or something like that and they on them and they say, oh, yeah, that's a firefighter. They're here to help me. Sounds pretty basic, but, you know. Also with that, kind of leads us into the next one, are understanding how to use a fire extinguisher in the placement. Okay? And I jumped a little bit, and yes, I'm going to back up. So your fire extinguishers generally, you want what's called an ABC fire extinguisher. This is for paper. This is for flammable liquids and electrical fires, right? So ABC is your basic. Anybody got magnesium laying around their house? They do have fire extinguishers that are meant for metals too, but you don't need those. Unless you do. So understanding what type you have, where it's at, and how to use it. Back to these events. They will show you how to use them and that sort of stuff. We live in the good old YouTube age, right? Where you can watch a video on how to actually use it. But you know, the one thing is that understanding where it's at and that it doesn't get covered up and buried. So yeah, I've seen it where people are like, yeah, I got a fire extinguisher. Like, where is it? I don't know, it's underneath the sink somewhere. Where? I don't know, it's underneath or underneath all that junk. What's the point at that point, right? You got a fire going on, you want to be able to get it and put that fire out. So that's where you have to be able to make that decision. Is this fightable? Is this something I can fight, or is this something I can walk away from and just say, screw it, right? Our oldest daughter, she's a troublemaker, isn't she? So, you know, she had a bedroom in the basement and that sort of stuff. And she was at home and they were cooking something. And she didn't have a grease fire, but she caught something on fire. on the stove. And she did right. She got a pan and put it over it, and put it out. We said, Des, why didn't you use the fire extinguisher? And she went, we have a fire extinguisher? Yeah, right at the top of the stairs from the basement. You've passed it for the last 5 years. And she went, oh, I don't know. I just got used to it. I didn't even realize it was there. So again, you don't want that fire extinguisher that's always been around to all of a sudden turn into just a thing in the corner that no one really pays attention to anymore. Details, right? So understanding how to use them, where they're at, and also make sure they're not expired. So a lot of times you're going to look at the dial, it has this little green zone, and then you want that knob, or you want that pointer to be in that green zone. They also have an expiration date. Some of them, and this drives me nuts. Some of them have a stamp on the underside of the manufacture date, which is great. Some are good for 3 years. Some are good for 12 years. Doesn't make sense, right? So find out. If you have to buy a new one, ask that question. I want this one that's good for 12 years. Right on the darn thing when you bought it, And, one of the things you can do on your yearly checklist is check that fire extinguisher, tip it upside down, give it a couple whacks on the bottom because that powder and whatnot's going to settle down. It really sucks when you go to it and yeah, it's in the green, but it don't work. So details like that, make that part of your fire escape planning and whatnot. Egress windows, and I bring this one up because egress windows are designed to be able to get out. They're also designed so that they're big enough to let the firefighters with the packs and all that be able to get in. A basement that does not have an egress window, that has those windows that are this big, is not meant for sleeping. And there are a lot of people that, they're like, oh, I have an egress. I have stairs. If the stairs are on fire, you're going to squeeze through that window way up there that you may be able to open or not. So egress windows and where they're placed and all this sort of stuff. And this is where I talked about that security getting in the way of safety. So I've had it where people have had an egress window in their basement, had it cut out, everything is right. There's a window well, deep window well on the outside, ladder to go up. And I've seen it over and over again where there's a grate on top. And people go, man, if somebody got down there, there's no cover on this grate. There's no lock on this grate. If somebody got down there, they could break into my house. So I'm going to drill a hole through this metal and I'm going to wrap this cable through and make it so that you can't open that up, right? Security thinking. Not thinking that you need to get out of there if there's a fire. That's where I'm talking about those things. And I've seen this over and over and over again. Other small details, and I'll pick on these guys now talking about windows. I'm going to pass this guy around to you guys. So this is a window lock. You can actually buy these. And what that is that it has a key on it. I'm going to make this window really secure. I'm going to lock it. I'm going to lock the key. Okay. Do you leave the key inside? Why would you? So you take the key. Can you open that lock to get out of that window? No. But that window's secure. Is it very safe anymore? No. Right? You see how I'm talking about this sort of stuff. Another one is double cylinder deadbolts. Most deadbolts have a throw on one side, hand throw, and a keyed lock on the outside, but they do sell what are called double cylinder deadbolts. And I don't have the parts, but it's a key on both sides. Why do they sell those? They do. And sometimes they're acceptable, maybe on a shed or a garage or something like that. But I've seen it where people put them in their houses. That is one of the main egress points. And if you lock that, again, what are you going to do? Leave the key in the deadbolt? That doesn't make sense. So what? You lock it, and in a fire situation, you're going to remember, oh yeah, the key's in the junk drawer over here, and no, you're not going to remember that. Security trumping safety. Okay. Another small detail: lock sets. So, you put a lock set in, and you have the bottom latch, and you have the top deadbolt, say. All right. There have been issues where the firefighters have found the person dead on the other side of the door. They got all the way to that exit, and they couldn't get out. Why couldn't they get out? Well, you've all seen the knobs where you have to turn that little lever to be able to open that bottom latch to be able to leave. And in their panic mode brain, they don't think about turning that little lever. And the smoke gets them. So they have lock sets now where you can, no matter if it's locked, I'm not talking deadbolt, I'm talking lower lock. Doesn't matter if it's locked or not. If you're on the inside, you can always open it up. You don't have to turn that little knob. It's a nice detail. You'll lock yourself out of the house a couple times. You're used to it. But it's one of those small details where if you're buying me, say, a new lock set, might be something to think about. Another one is that we're talking about windows and all this sort of stuff. Now we're talking about safety. Or I'm sorry, security. Most often, if somebody is breaking into your house, they want to do it very quietly. And I always say, if your window is not in use, meaning that it's open for some reason, it should be locked. It's good for the window. It's going to keep it from warping and all this sort of stuff. It's going to make it so that somebody just can't walk up and go and open the window and get in. Okay. Do you want to put a key lock on the thing? Maybe not. But, if those windows are not in use, lock the things. It's going to make those windows last a lot longer, believe me, especially casement windows. The other is that you have deadbolts on your exterior doors. I don't know why people don't throw those deadbolts, but they don't. And then you'll get people who say, I throw a deadbolt, it's good. So you see this door back here? So the frame on these doors is about, this thick, right? And the screws they send with the deadbolt are this long. So how much do you think that's going to stop somebody from just putting their body weight into it and be able to break that door in? Not much at all. So you have your deadbolt throw, and you also have the bottom latch, the strike, that are held in by these small screws. Simple solution, get longer screws. And what you're doing is you're actually running through the frame of the door, and I'm moving again, sorry. You're moving through the frame of the door into the wood framing into the house and securing that door up a little bit more. Is it going to stop somebody? No. Is it going to slow somebody down? Yeah. And like I said, a lot of different varieties out there. I'm going to pass these guys around. And this is one of those things you can go home and pull one screw out, and I bet you money it's one of these shorties. And you can get a longer screw. And you'll know if you dig into the framing of the house. Detail on that, don't go hog wild and actually warp your frame. It can cause other issues, right? But you can secure that door up a little bit more. If you have wood doors, you can put on these plates where that door is less likely to split. You can do a double plate or single, something like this for a deadbolt or whatever. You can put in all sorts of latches and whatnot. The thing to keep in mind with like doors is you're never really going to stop somebody. You want to make it so that it's such a pain in the butt that they're just going to move on, or they have to make so much noise that they just want to move on, right? And it sounds silly, lock your doors or lock your windows. You don't want somebody breaking in. Another one is that don't leave your stuff, your kids get a brand new, whatever the newest game system is, right? And they have it sitting right out there in the wide open. And the blinds are up. And the window's open to boot or unlocked. So, details, right? So, think about that sort of stuff, Even down to sometimes thieves will look at your garbage. Oh man, they got right around Christmas. Oh yeah, they got that box. They got that. Oh, I like that. And they'll wait till later and then come on in. So keep those in mind. And a lot of it is really simple. He said the key thing to remember is slow them down. Make it so that it is going to be such a pain that they just don't want to deal with it. Security systems, great. Now, especially these days, you have, the home monitoring systems and the Ring doorbells and all that sort of stuff. That's great. There is nothing wrong with those. And it is one of those deterrents. So emergency lighting is another one. Quickly running out of time. Emergency lighting is one of those things where, you may want a flashlight, and it sounds goofy. So let's say your power goes out, and you say, my panel box, something goes out, power's out, whatever. You want to check your panel box, and you go to the top of the stairs, and it's dark as all get out, and you don't have a flashlight, and they go down the stairs. Have a flashlight that actually works. So back in the day, we used to have one. It was a plug-in style, where we wouldn't be running out of batteries or whatever, and we made sure our kids understood that if you want to play with a flashlight, here, play with this one. That one you don't mess with unless you need to. Or you can have, battery operated lighting where when the power goes off, similar to in commercial situations where the light come on. So having that light can make a huge difference. And it's little minor injuries or even major injuries that lighting can help. Think about it on the outside too. I know I've seen a lot of times where they have little path lighting, and most people think that's decorative. That's something that makes the house look nice. And they're right. But they also have the issue of if somebody walking down their path or their sidewalk and they step on the side and they roll their ankle because there's a height difference between the concrete and the dirt because they can't see it, right? So that simple kind of path lighting can make it so that little issues like that don't jack up your insurance rates because people are, hurting themselves on your property. So lighting, in lots of different ways to be able to use lighting. Landscaping is another one. You want to make it so that you don't want to make a situation where either somebody can sit there and hide behind a large bush and either come out after you or have enough cover where they could work on something for a long time and no one from the road is going to know any better, right? Other details. Let's say you have a fence and kids are jumping that fence constantly, or somebody's, you don't want people getting into your backyard. You can plant bushes that they can jump into that bush, but it will probably be the last time they do. Thorny bushes, right? Thorny bushes underneath windows that you keep trimmed down. Are they going to be crawling up in those? No. And again, this is, just details like that. Space heaters, I want to talk about this one real quick. Space heaters are one of those things, especially in the winter. Your power goes out. People think, I want a space heater that uses kerosene. What's the byproduct of kerosene? Talked about this earlier. There you go. See a problem with that if you're running this thing inside? Yeah. And also people say, I want a space heater because, my heating system sucks and this room's really cold. And they go to a garage sale and they say, there's a great space heater. And, the person's like, yeah, I've had this thing for 30 years. It's a champ. It just keeps going. Great. Does it have safety features? Like if a blanket is thrown over it and it overheats, is it going to shut off? If it gets tipped over, is it going to shut off? Just because something works and has been working for a long time, it may not have those safety features built in. Got another story about that. Heard your cousin almost burned our house down because of a space heater in the room in that drafty trailer. Yeah. So it's just details like that, and you want to keep that in mind. So if you're buying something like that, supplemental heat, that sort of thing, make sure it's got those safety features built in, you know. We talked about maintaining the windows and locks and doors, security systems. Identity theft is another one. That's a whole other bag of mess as far as stuff. But it is one of those things you have to really keep in mind. Make sure your insurance is up to date and understand what your insurance is about. These storms should have woken up a few people because they're like, my tree fell and hit our house. And they're like, well, you don't have that policy. And they're like, what? So talk to your insurance company. Find out how much your deductible is, that sort of stuff. And I think they're still doing insurance class and stuff. So, yeah, just making sure that's up to date. Making sure that, say you had insurance for the last 20 years. And you haven't updated how much it's going to cost if you have to rebuild your house. And they're keeping it on old terms. And they say, yeah, you're great. Yep, we're going to give you $80,000 to build your brand new house. And you go, well, thanks. That'll be a start. So keep that in mind also. So like I said, there's a lot more things that we can get into with home safety and security, but it's that thing of just keep it in the back of your mind. I don't want people to walk away going, oh my God, I'm terrified to go back in my home. No, just have that understanding. And, like I said, if you come back to one of the classes, sometimes something has to mull around in the back of your head for a couple of weeks and you say, hey, I got a question about whatever, feel free. So, or I think you can send these guys questions and they can bounce them off somebody else. So. Everybody good? I'm sorry I went over a little bit. Good? All right. Thanks for coming.
Thank you again, Mr. Taylor. I learned a lot. I'm definitely going to go straight home and find out where our fire extinguisher is. But also, like he said, these classes are cumulative, and I can kind of tell that things are building off one another. So make sure that you check out our schedule. Mr. Taylor teaches much of our home maintenance courses, and he's an excellent resource. You can email us as well. I wanted to let you know that we do have Intro to Gardening tomorrow. If you guys are interested at 6 also, light snacks and refreshments will be served. But grab some more snacks. Thanks again for coming. Thanks to Old National Bank for the sponsorship, and have a great night.